Okay, so here are some reminders on unit circles before we get started. So remember that the vertical axis is always going to be sine, and the horizontal axis is always going to be cosine. So I broke up the unit circles here for you so that when they give you the value of where each point is on the unit circle, you can find it. So here's a reminder on that. So 0 and 2 pi, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and then back to 2 pi. So just remember that each half is broken up into 2's. And then for these ones, these are the 3's. So pi over 3, 2 pi over 3, 4 pi over 3, and 5 pi over 3. And then remember when you have values with the 3's that they'll be 60-degree angles. Here are the 4's, pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4. And the angles for these will be 45-degree angles. And again, they should have covered this in the last ditto. This is just a review. Here are the 6's, so pi over 6, 5 pi over 6, 7 pi over 6, and 11 pi over 6. I just didn't write all of them because the other values of them can be reduced. So for example, if I had 2 pi over 6 here, that could be reduced to pi over 3, so I just didn't write those ones. And these ones will be the 30-degree angles. So a few other reminders. One way to help you remember which quadrants are positive and negative is to think of these as x and y axes. So think of it as a graph. This is going to be positive, this is negative, that's negative. So kind of think about it in the context of a graph. And then these are what the values of sine and cosine depending on the angle. So when the angle is 30 degrees, the value of sine will be a half. Value of cosine will be the square root of 3 over 2. For 60 degrees, it's swapped. So sine will be the square root of 3 over 2, and cosine will be a half. And then for 45 degrees, just remember that sine and cosine will be the same. So square root of 2 over 2 and square root of 2 over 2. And then depending on what quadrant they're in, that will affect whether they're positive or negative. Returning to the concept that we're thinking about these as x-axes and this as the y-axis, then when you have cosine at either one of these points, it will be 1 or negative 1. And when you have sine at either one of these points, it will be 1 or negative 1. Which means that if we are thinking about this as x and y axes, then here, when sine is 1, cosine will be 0, and vice versa with cosine. When cosine is equal to 1, sine will be 0. So keep in mind the whole idea that this is like the y-axis and this is like the x-axis. One other thing to remember is when they give you a negative value here and they want you to calculate cosine or sine or tangent or whatever this ends up being, remember that you have to go the opposite direction around the unit circle to find this. So negative 5 pi over 6 is actually equal to pi over 6 if you had gone the regular direction, and then you would just find cosine like normal. Alright, last thing we might need to keep in mind for this ditto is that we need to remember that cosecant is the reciprocal of sine, secant is the reciprocal of cosine, and cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent. That will be important for when we're doing the unit circles of cosecant, secant, and cotangent. Okay, so first we're going to go over how to find exact values on cosecant unit circles. So first find 3 pi over 4 on the unit circle, which is the same as normal. Okay, next label the angle, which in this case is 45 degrees. Then label the sides. Because the angle is 45 degrees, both sine and cosine will be the square root of 2 over 2. Sine will be positive and cosine will be negative because 3 pi over 4 is in the second quadrant. Since cosecant is the reciprocal of sine and sine is the square root of 2 over 2, cosecant is equal to 2 over the square root of 2. Okay, to make this legal, multiply the top and bottom by the square root of 2 and cancel out the remaining 2's. And your answer should be the square root of 2. Okay, so the next one we're going to do is a secant unit circle. So again, you're going to find 11 pi over 6 on the unit circle, and you're going to label the angle, which is 30 degrees. In this case, sine is negative 1/2, and cosine is the square root of 3 over 2. So since secant is the reciprocal of cosine, and cosine is square root of 3 over 2, secant equals 2 over the square root of 3. And then you're going to want to make that legal, so you're going to multiply the top and bottom by the square root of 3. And that will give you 2 square root of 3 over 3. All right, so the last type of backwards unit circle, if you will, we're going to do today is cotangent. So first you're going to find 5 pi over 3 on the unit circle again. You're going to label the angle, which is 60 degrees. In this case, sine is equal to negative square root of 3 over 2, and cosine is equal to 1/2. Cotangent is equal to cosine over sine. So you're going to put 1/2 over negative square root of 3 over 2. And the 2's are going to cancel, which leaves you with negative 1 over the square root of 3. And again, you need to make that legal, so you're going to multiply the top and bottom by the square root of 3, which is going to give you negative square root of 3 over 3. Okay, so here's the work for 2a, b, and c. Don't forget that when sine and to watch out for when sine and cosine are 1 or 0, especially on c, because 0 will end up being on the bottom because sine is 0 in this case, so it ends up being undefined. Okay, so here are the answers for 3a, b, and c. Don't forget that when it's negative, you have to go the opposite direction around the unit circle, so negative 7 pi over 6 is going to be over here. So we got 2, negative 2, and 1. And then the answers for 4 are 2 square root of 3 over 3, undefined, and negative square root of 3. And you can pause the video if you want to get those.